Hi, I'm Stephanie. This is Making Poor Decisions, and today we're making an Acerglyn. Alright, let's make an Acerglyn. But what is an Acerglyn? Well, essentially, an Acerglyn is a mead that is made with part honey and part maple syrup. But in order for it to still be considered a mead, at least 51% or more of the fermentable sugars need to come from the honey, while 49% or less of the fermentable sugars need to come from maple syrup. If there's more maple syrup than honey, then essentially that just becomes an Acer, or a wine made from maple syrup. So today I am going to be using this maple syrup, which is a Burton's pure maple syrup that has been aged in bourbon barrels, and some Be Natural LLC Butterbean Honey that I have here soaking in my warm bath of sanitization fluid. It just makes the honey flow out a little bit easier, makes my life a little bit easier too when I'm pouring. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm first going to start with my maple syrup. I am going to be using pretty much all of this syrup in today's batch. I normally do anywhere between 2.5 to 3 pounds of honey, so I want to see first where I'm going to be with this maple syrup. And as you can see, the maple syrup I don't need to soak in the warm water because natural maple flows out nice and easy, and I have just about a pound, which is great. So which means I'm probably going to do about 2 pounds of my honey. This way I have a 2-to-1 ratio of honey to maple syrup, which is exactly what I want. So it's still going to be considered a mead. It will be a true Acerglyn. And I have about 3 pounds of honey in this container here. So that is going to leave me with another pound just in case I want to back sweeten when I put this into secondary. Well, what is that? Well, I'll explain that if I need to when I get to secondary. So I'm going to cut now because this is going to take me about 10 minutes to pour all of this lovely, beautiful honey into my carboy, and I'll be back in a few moments. Alrighty, so we have our honey and our maple syrup in our carboy or fermenter, and I ended up with about 3 pounds 2 ounces. 1 pound 1 ounce coming from my maple syrup and 2 pounds 1 ounce coming from my butterbean honey. Now, if you want to make this on your own, I can't stress this enough. Please make sure you're getting real honey and real maple syrup, not golden cornstarch that's claiming to be honey or brown cornstarch that's claiming to be maple syrup. I'm looking at you, Mrs. Butterworth. It has to be the real deal, or else it's going to taste kind of gross. So right now we are ready for the next stage, which is adding our water. Now, the amount of water I want to add right now is about halfway full. Do this very slowly, because at this stage all I want to do is mix the sugars and the water together. And when you do this, yeah, that looks good, maybe a little bit more. You want to mix until you don't see any of the sugars, and by sugars I mean honey or maple syrup, sticking to the sides or the bottom of the fermenter. If you still see like a little bit of syrup on the sides there, it just means you need to mix a little bit more. Also to this mixture, I am going to add my strongly brewed black tea. And this could be any black tea of your choice. I think herbal might work as well, or green tea, white tea. But basically you want to get something that's high in tannins, because this is where we're going to get the tannins in our mead. And I'm adding about 10 ounces of this. And I'm also going to add about 5 tangerine peels. These are dried tangerine peels. And this is what's going to give us our acidity and a little bit of complexity. You can hear my cat jumping around in the background. I'm sure at some point you'll meet him, but for right now he's focused on his automatic feeder. So right now I'm going to plug this up, give it a shake, or I should say my lovely assistant's going to give it a shake because I am broken, hashtag bird bones, and I'll be right back. Alrighty, so we have our honey, our maple syrup, and our water all shaken up. We also added in our black tea and our tangerine peels. Next step is to fill the rest of this up. Well, not the rest of this, but a little bit more water. And then, just about here for now. Because what I'm going to add next is my yeast, and today I'm using 5-star Premier Blanc wine yeast. This is great to make meads, dry white wines, ciders. You can even make sodas with this. And the reason that I'm using this particular brand today is because it has neutral esters, which means it won't give a fruity taste or a fruity smell like Lalvin D47 yeast would, or it won't give like a banana or a melon smell like Lalvin 71B yeast will. This is pretty neutral, so if you want something that's not going to get in the way of the flavors of your mead or your Acerglyn or anything else, I definitely recommend this. It also has a pretty high alcohol tolerance of about 18%, which doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's just what it can go up to. But it doesn't guarantee you're going to get an 18% brew, or it doesn't guarantee it's going to stop at 18%. It just knows, or we know from the alcohol tolerance on this yeast that I got from their website, that it can go up to 18%, or the average is 18%. So I added that in. Next, I'm going to add my slurry of Yeast Nutrient, and that is spring water with about a teaspoon of fermaid-o. And if you watched my last video, you know fermaid-o is yeast hulls or dead yeast that the yeast can add in addition to the sugars to kind of kickstart fermentation and make a tastier brew. The more stressed your yeast are, or your little yeasty beasties get, the more off flavors you might get in your brew. So do you need to do this step of giving them some nutrients? Not necessarily, but I've been doing it recently and I've been finding that my brews have been tasting better. So I do it. So now I just want to give this another little swirl. I'm going to be adding a little bit more water, but I want to also incorporate that yeast and get some of this mixed up. I also want to try and get some of this foam down, because if you're new to home brewing, I'd like to warn you about overflow, which is when the yeast get really active. They start producing bubbles, and the bubbles can come up through your fermenter, through your airlock, and all over your walls. It's an easy solution. You can get what's called a blow-off tube, which is essentially just a tubing that you would put in your bung here, and it would just blow into another container. I recommend putting it in a bathtub or maybe another tub if you have it, if you have a really, really active brew. But I'm trying to get some of that foam down now so I don't run into that problem early on. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but if we can try and avoid it, I will. Now I try to fill the container up. Whoop. Actually, that's pretty good, I think. Just about the shoulders, a little bit above the shoulders, that should be fine. Now my next step is testing my gravity. And again, is this step absolutely needed? Not necessarily, but if you're like myself and you want to know the exact amount of alcohol that's in your brew, or I really shouldn't say exact, it's approximate. Everything with home brewing is going to be approximate. But if you want to know approximately how much alcohol is in your brew, this step is absolutely necessary. And in order to do that, you need a graduated cylinder and a hydrometer. And this is going to measure the sugar density in your must. And what you do is take a brewer's baster, like so, that has been properly sanitized. Everything I'm using, by the way, has been sanitized in a solution of very, very hot water. and a substance called star sand, which is primarily used in brewing, home brewing, whatever. It kills all the nasty beasties, microbes, what have you, that will create off flavors in your brew or otherwise ruin your brew and allow your yeasty beasties to thrive. So let's take a look at my gravity here. Oh, pretty strong actually. All right, so we have a starting gravity of approximately 1.092, which is pretty good. And I'm going to pour this back into my fermenter, because as I mentioned before, everything has been sanitized and it's perfectly okay. I want to make sure that my brew is accurate, has as much yeasty beasties as it needs. And that's pretty much it. Now all we have to do is plug it up with our bung, grab my double-sided airlock here that I'm going to fill with my sanitized water. That's a little bit too much. Still a little too much. Put that in here. I prefer the S-shaped airlocks. There are other airlocks too that are 3 pieces, but I don't know, I just like these a little bit better. It's still probably a little bit too much, but it's going to be just fine. It's going to do its job. And now we let it sit. Let it sit for about 2 weeks. So follow back up with me in about 2 weeks from now, and we will have our next gravity reading. I'm also likely going to be putting this into secondary, which means taking it away from the yeast cake that's at the bottom, that will form at the bottom, and letting it clear up a little bit more before we bottle it. Thank you so much for watching this video today. If you like it, please like it and subscribe. I do have another video posted where I show you how to make a basic mead. So if you just want something simple, go back to that video and you can check that out. And check with me next time where we're going to be making sake. Peace. Actually, one more thing. If you wanted to make your own brews, if this is something that interests you and you don't know where to start, head on over to Homebrew Ohio. I am an affiliate of theirs, and there is an affiliate link in the description of this video. The affiliate link doesn't cost you any extra, but it does put a few coins in my pocket if you decide that you wanted to try this on your own. You can get a fermentation bucket there. You can get yeast there. You can get pretty much everything you're going to need to make mead except for the honey. And yeah, I really recommend them. They're great people. Do check them out. And again, see you next time.